Now, there's been a lot of confusion over switchgrass and how it relates to deer bedding. And I want to clear that up for you and give you some examples why. That's something I've known for a long time, and even some visuals way back in the day. I can think of a client, Luke. He was in Delaware, 2012 client, I think January or February 2012, flew out to see Luke. And he had 3 large switchgrass areas, and they'd use switchgrass to try to control an invasive shrub. I think it was Lespedeza. They used to plant it for quail, and they found out that, hey, even though the government planted, state wanted to plant it, this didn't work for quail. So then it was invasive. They tried to get rid of it for years, and they did that by planting switchgrass, burning it to get the woody structure out, switchgrass, burning it, back and forth. They finally would get rid of that, and that left some pockets. They tried to plant portions of that into sawtooth oak and pine. Those thickets grew up into about a small garage-sized island within 30 acres of switch. A few trees here and there, little islands. And it was interesting, when we were out there in 2012, as far as related to deer bedding, even though there might have been 100 acres of switchgrass, 90 acres, and then a few acres of these pockets, they had 26 deer die of EHD the previous year. 1 they found in the woods. 25 they found in those bedding pockets. Those pockets of sawtooth oak, because they had sunlight coming into them. They're full of briars, regeneration, conifers. That's where the deer died. It tells you something about switch and where deer choose to call security cover. They didn't die in the switch. They died in those bedding pockets. And that was early in 2012, and it really hit home to me because I already recognized that deer wouldn't bed in the switch. Clients would tell me they didn't bed in the switch. You would see they didn't bed in the switch, but why? It really hit a home there in talking about diversity pockets. And that's why for a very long time I've really pushed diversity pockets, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, how to create them. Why don't deer bed in switch? They don't bed in switchgrass because deer need to feed 5 times in a 24-hour period. That means they need to stand up and feed on browse. They need browse close to their bedding areas. They don't want to travel 200 yards from their secure bedding area to a food source and then go back. They would need something in their bedding areas. That something is hardwood regeneration, woody shrub tips, briar tips, even mass crop during the fall, beech nut, acorns. That can account for some bedding food, almost similar to browse. Same category anyways, hard to digest. The bottom line is they need to eat foods. They don't want to leave the security of that bedding area. So that's why deer don't like to bed in switchgrass alone without having that browse within that area. They want to leave that area and then go to that great food source, preferably a food plot on private land, maybe a big open clear cut on public land, and then they go feed on that. That's their main food source for the 3rd feeding of the day, and then the 4th and 5th under the cover of darkness. Grass is grass. That's why it doesn't matter if it's big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass, switchgrass. It's grass. More grass is not diversity, it's just more grass, just like more pine plantation. It does the same things as it relates to wildlife. More pines, a different variety of pine, is not more diversity. It's just more pine. Pine is pine, grass is grass. So it's the same thing. That's why deer leave the security of bedding. They want to be able to browse, and that's why switchgrass doesn't work, because it's just grass. It's not a food source. And that's why you can't, just jumping ahead to number 3, why you can't mix bedding and food together. Because if you have enough browse, that means the switchgrass is not thick enough. It's falling down during the fall. It's not appreciable during the fall. It doesn't give actual deer enough cover to bed in if there's enough food. And if there's enough grass to where it's solid and thick and outcompetes weeds, then you don't have any food source that can grow in there either. So that's why you need them separate. That's why there's no, quote, bedding in a bag mix that works. Because you can't mix clovers and alfalfa, chicory, whatever it might be, various browsing type weeds, goldenrod, ragweed, and switchgrass together and say, well, this is a great bedding area, because it's not going to be in November, December when it all falls down, or it's too thin because you have switchgrass that might still be standing, but it's not appreciable enough to have cover. If it's appreciable enough to have cover, again, it's going to shade out any of the food types in that area. So how do you convert an area? What makes a good bedding area? We'll look at this area right here. Doesn't matter what size it is. Let's just say this is all switchgrass. This entire area. Just make it into a big, messy rectangle square where there's all switchgrass right here. It's all switchgrass. You take pockets within that area, clear them out, whatever shape, whatever size. As a general rule, if I'm looking at 10 acres, I want those pockets to be 1/40th of that size, maybe a 1/4 acre. 1/8 of an acre at the most, so 1/40th, 1/80th, 1/50th the size, not 1%. Meaning if you have a 10-acre area, you're not creating 1-acre pockets because you run out of pockets pretty soon. You want those smaller than that. Hope that makes sense. If you have a 40-acre area, you're not going to make 1/4 acre openings. You might make a few, but you could actually have 2-acre areas in that 40 acres. That's, large enough, 1 acre somewhere in there, to where you can actually have a number in there and break it up. But bottom line is you're creating edge. In those pockets, you want some type of food that's non-grass, non-conifer. Briars. We work with big rock trees with Tom and Seth, and they have browse, willows, hybrid poplars, redwoods or dogwood. They have a lot of browse species of cuttings that you can stab into those areas. You can even fence them until they take hold after 2 years. Briars are a great choice. Box elder and red maple seeds, great choices. Early successional growth, let it grow into ragweed, goldenrod, whatever it might be. But you want some, especially woody browse in there in the form of shrubs or trees, to give the deer something that they feed on. Now you have the perfect combination, because now what you have in those areas, you actually have a food source. It doesn't have to be the best food source. In fact, typically you don't want clover in there. You don't want alfalfa. You don't want apple trees, because you want the deer to leave this bedding area and you want them to travel, and you want them to actually hit this food source over here. What does that do when they have to travel? They travel 200 yards, 100 yards, whatever it might be. Now you have the opportunity for stand locations where they exit their bedding area, stand locations right before the food source, stand locations at the food source, maybe shooting from a distance with a gun. You can hunt right here. We could actually add a water hole in front of one of these stand locations on the way to food, not on the food, because they're already traveling there. And how about we have some stand locations at the back of the bedding? You access these from this back side. Come into this area, you're not going around food then, you're not going through food to spook them in the morning. You're waiting for the deer to come back to you then after they feed in the morning. That starts to set that assemblage of movement and stand locations. Morning stands, afternoon stands closer to food, morning stands closer to bedding. The bottom line is that's how you create a bedding area. It's no different than if you have a 10-acre stand of conifers. You make 1/8 acre, 1/2 acre, 1/4 acre cuttings, take out the pines, and get something else in there that's not grass, not conifer, because that's just a base form of bedding. But then you use that conifer as a base form of bedding, just like the switchgrass. Switchgrass is cool because in 2 years you can have a bedding area. It becomes very thick during October, November, December. Maybe some wet snows in January, February knock it down, but you've already had really good cover throughout the deer season. And if switchgrass won't hold up, nothing else will. That's a grass. That's the stiffest grass out there. The bottom line is this is a bedding area. It's about 40-50% switchgrass, 60% at the most. The rest is something else. And it's not a mix, it's actual separate. Here's switchgrass, black areas. There's food regeneration, the green areas. You don't want to mix switchgrass with the green area. You don't want to mix food into the black area because you dilute the power of both. That's how you separate them. That's why there's no mix. Going back to number 3, where you can say, well, I'm going to plant this mix. It's going to be the greatest, latest mix for bedding. No, you can't do that. There's no bedding area that comes in a bag. There might be 2 bags of bedding area. Like we have our Pollinator blend we sell. It's full of pheasant nut goodies. My friend Colin gave us some really good seeds to add to that mix and put into that mix. He's a pheasant hunting nut. He's got a wildlife management degree. It doesn't have anything to do with what he does now. So he's not like this guru scientist pheasant hunter, but he loves pheasant hunting. That's his passion. And those are some of his favorite seed blends we added in that Pollinator because that's great browse for deer, turkeys, pheasant, rabbits, birds, butterflies, bees. That's that mix. But Pollinator blend, shrubs, trees, just letting it go, early successional growth, and just spraying the grass out of it. Spray clethodim in the area, get rid of the grass, let the broadleaves come in, especially that early successional growth of shrubs and trees. That's where you have that perfect mix, and that's why you don't have that in a bag. We also have switchgrass. Our switchgrass blends a little bit different because you can't plant one switchgrass that's good from, say, the UP of Michigan, northern Michigan, all the way to Kentucky. That's like saying you have an apple tree that you can plant during that entire range. No, you can't. You have, look at it like from northern Michigan to northern Ohio, central Ohio. That's a range right there, like a cave and rock. We have a great switchgrass variety that's great for a northern area, a southern area, and a western area. It has that base switchgrass that should be in that location, and then it has a couple shorter stiffening varieties to help thicken up the stand. That's why you don't plant Shawnee, a switchgrass that's more western related, over in New Jersey or southern Ohio. And that's why you traditionally wouldn't plant a lot of cave and rock, for example, over in Montana or North Dakota, South Dakota. You have more Dakota varieties or Shawnee out west. I hope that makes sense. If there's a switchgrass variety in Canada, that doesn't mean it's good for Kentucky or Central Ohio. Think about that spacing of how good it's for. A state and a half when you talk about northern Michigan to Central Ohio. That's about the range, maybe southern Ohio at the extreme end. But that's where a southern variety will kick in. That's why we sell the southern variety, northern variety, western variety. The bottom line is those switchgrass bags of seed themselves, if you're buying 10 acres of switchgrass from us and you think that's going to create the latest, greatest bedding area because you have all that switch in a 10-acre field and nothing else, you're sorely mistaken. Buy half as much. I'm telling you, buy half as much seed. Pick the seed blend that's best for your area based on north, south, or west. Buy half as much and then put maybe a little bit. I usually use like a 4-to-1 ratio of pollinator blend, 3-to-1, something like that, where you're not using as much pollinator. You want a little bit of that in there, but then you really want that hardwood regeneration in the form of shrubs, trees, and briars are great for that mix. Early successional growth, I like it all. Switchgrass, your base form of cover, really should never be more than 50-60% at most in a given area. And the rest should be that good stuff that those deer crave, getting back to them feeding 5 times in a 24-hour period. Give them the food and the cover in the same location, but don't mix the two. I hope this makes sense right here. That's where you get bedding in 2 bags, not 1. You can't mix the 2 and make a great mix. You have switchgrass over here, something else over here. That's what creates a bedding area, separating those 2 in the same area. That's when you can really explode your populations on your property. You know what's really cool about that? So you can have flowers in there, forbs, forages. We have perching grass with a big 1 piece of blue stem every little bit in our pollinator blend. Great for birds, butterflies, bees, rabbits, pheasant, and oh yes, deer. So when you make an area like this, you have so much diversity that it includes a lot of wildlife variety, and that's what diversity is. Not having more grass in a bag, not having more conifers in a stand in the woods. Instead, having different types of plants growing in the same spot. Also having solid blocks cover, solid blocks of browse, early successional growth, and that'll keep all critters on your property happy and actually building populations and give you and start to create that assemblage of movement for you where you can have multiple stands looking at the same movement. You have food somewhere else, big quality food and browse back in their cover, and then that switchgrass bedding area as the base form of cover, but not the bedding in a bag by itself. Now, I don't know if you've checked out our main website lately, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, but we've really had a lot going on, including hats, books, our web class, and certainly our new seed company, WHS Wildlife Blends. When you click on seed on our site, it'll take you right to our brand new site for the seed company. We have all 12 blends available. So check it all out though. I encourage you, I appreciate you checking it out. Whether you buy anything or not, really appreciate you visiting the site and seeing what's going on, and continue to watch because we have big things coming later this year.